Welcome, the annual Fireside Chat. This year has been a momentous year as far as developing our history and getting it out to the public in various medias. And I hope you watch all these things that we have produced on the internet, and we will have more coming shortly thereafter. Uh, One person asked for a typical day in the life. Well, there was two different scenarios in this. One was in Vietnam. And in Vietnam, I lived in a little villa that had servants, and I'd have breakfast there before climbing on my Honda motorcycle and going out to the airport. This was a wonderful way to start the day, except one day I could smell what smelled like the cook had been using Nook Mom in the kitchen, which puts out a pungent odor when it's used for cooking. But I was wrong. The first bite of the eggs told me that they were rotten, and that ruined the rest of the morning. I jumped on my steed and rode out to the operations building. We did not have a little mess hall out there at that time. And in operations, I perused the schedule and what pilots had arrived and those that were late, and tried to delve on what I was going to do for the rest of the scheduled day. Occasionally, I would jump on board and fly with a crew and give them a check ride, which was usually kind of cruel in some ways, I guess. But I was testing their mettle, and we were not flying in a scheduled environment like we were in the United States, where you had nav aids and all the rest of that sort of thing. So I was rather brutal as far as making sure that they would be able to deal with unusual situations. But when I moved to Laos, it was a totally different scenario. In Laos, we had a mess hall out in the operations building. So in the morning, I would get up and not bother the maid to cook any breakfast and go out to operations and have breakfast out there. And that was rather pleasant. And when I was in Laos, I wasn't tasked with having to ride herd on a group of pilots. So I had my crew and my airplane. After breakfast, I would go out to the airplane, pre-flight it, and begin my day of whatever the schedule required. Most of the time in the 123 program in Laos, we were doing airdropping, which was done because sometimes the enemy was too close to the strip, or the strip wasn't long enough to land and offload cargo on. And airdropping is a ballet in the sky. I really enjoyed that so much. You're getting paid to offload the airplane, for one, because you were in the air. But it was a totally different environment from Vietnam. We garnered project pay or hazard pay from the time we came off the ground until we came back. And that was a little extra change in your pocket. And the weather in Laos was the other factor that you had to deal with. We had a smoky season where the villagers burned off the hillsides so they could plant their poppies. And that created a milk bottle effect. You could see straight down, but you couldn't see anything in front of you. It was like flying in a milk bottle. We had no ATC or radar or anything like that, nor electronic nav aids. We didn't have any of those things like GPS or autopilots and all that sort of thing. We relied on communicating between each other on a company frequency. And sometimes that would be rather jammed up, particularly during the smoky season as people started getting excited and their voices raised an octave as they were letting down into a valley, not knowing if there was a cumulogranite in front of them. And sometimes there was. And we lost aircraft due to misidentifying their route and letting down to the point where they met cumulogranite, which means a mountain, and severely limited their forward velocity and their lives. Airdropping in Laos was really a lot of fun. We have dropped a lot of things. Everything from rice, which would be double bagged, 40 kilos in a 100-kilo bag, and then double bagged. And you let that out the back of the airplane on a pallet of 1,200 pounds at 105 knots at 800 feet, and that would allow air resistance to slow that pallet down, and the bags would come off the pallet, and the last 100 feet or so they'd be falling vertically and they would not break and provide food for the village. In new areas, you always were having the problem of people running out trying to catch these 100-pound bags, and to their great demise. And also the plywood pallets that they were on, they try to catch those because it was great building material. And villages that knew what was coming, they'd all get the hell away from the drop zone and wait till the thunder stopped. And it was a thunder on the ground, I've heard it. And when a 100-kilo or 100-pound bag with 40 kilos of rice in it hit the ground, it would really make a thump. And it was like a minor little earthquake. And it was kind of exciting. And of course it was very welcome to the villagers that were down there. Now, some of the other things we dropped were munitions. Munitions normally would be in a parachute rig, and usually about 500 pounds under each pallet or under each parachute, and it's a 28-foot canopy, and they were all colored, and it was really kind of beautiful. When you finished dropping, it looked like you dropped flowers in the drop zone. But when they malfunctioned, that was also a disaster too, and I had one of those, which I ruled the day on that, and I adopted some more precautions as far as checking the load. Fuel drums were another one. Fuel drums were in the experimental stage at first. They tried dropping 6 drums on a pallet with a 100-foot parachute. Well, a 100-foot parachute you'd have to let go at 1,200 feet, and sometimes they'd open right away and be at the mercy of the wind, and it would carry them out of the drop zone. And sometimes when that chute opened, the pallet would break and shotgun the drums of fuel down, much to the dismay of the people on the ground. We finally just stabilized in 1 drum, 1 parachute, and that worked absolutely beautifully. These were days that were exciting, truthfully. And you had to learn the terrain. During the smoky season, Saibury, which was down below Luang Prabang, was in an area that was in a little valley and a nice strip. But if you didn't know the terrain around it, you scared the hell out of the co-pilot, because I knew the terrain, I knew the fences, lines, and everything else, and I could let down in that valley, and I wouldn't see the end of the runway until I was about a quarter of a mile from it, and pull the power off and land. And he'd be sitting over there shaking. But these were days that ended with you back at Vientiane, and we had a company bar there, and you could get a libation before you got in the crew bus or got in your vehicle and went home. And those were our days there. They were long, but they were filled with adrenaline, and that was my drug of choice. Thank you.